Welcome back to the podcast, guys. We are joined today by Willem from Unscared in the Netherlands. And I want to open with one question. Willem, how many members you got?
Straight to the dick measuring contest.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, we've been the last few years, including two lockdowns, the last 2-3 years, we've been balancing between about 550 and 600 active members in one location.
So if
In
you're
one
listening,
location.
now that I got your attention, I had to drop that right away. That's tremendous. We talk a lot about on the show about how members is not the only number to chase, but I'll be goddamn if it doesn't sound real good when you do have the most members in the room when you're talking. That sounds great.
Yeah.
But Willem, you've been going through. Willem and I have been friends for quite a few years. Willem was my main Dutch friend when I lived overseas. So we were the odd couple around there, the Danny DeVito and Arnold Schwarzenegger of the bunch.
100%.
But Willem has been transitioning a lot in the business lately to now you have started as a person who's coaching and doing too much coaching, and kind of guide me through your thought process and what you got from where you were at then to how you were able to scale now and really turn your business into a real business, and what that process looked like for you.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it brief. We are now almost in our 7th year of running the gym. And we started off both having no entrepreneurial experience, me and my business partner, actually fairly little gym experience as well. We just didn't really like most of the gyms we went to. So we were like, hey, I think we can do this better. It started off with my business partner's a few years older than me. He already got settled down in kids. And he was like, I'm not going to be working like 7 a.m. coaching classes. So he was like the planning guy, and I was like the workhorse that was teaching the classes, being a head coach, even though I hadn't done CrossFit for more than 3 months at that point. So that was a bit of a challenge. But I really like coaching weightlifting and CrossFit and some strength training that we did. So I basically did all the finance and all the coaching. And at some point we got more and more members, more and more classes. So it didn't really, it wasn't sustainable to coach more than 20, 30 classes a week, which is already, I think, a pretty crazy amount if you wanted to deliver a high-end service. But I was still convinced I'm going to be the head coach forever, and I'm going to coach a few classes, show the young guns how it's done with every new coach we hired. Mm-hmm. But after a few years, and maybe that's recognizable for you guys or people listening, sometimes it felt like a chore coaching another class again. And I got more and more coaches to cover shift for me. The new coaches got more and more popular. They sometimes outperformed me. Did
that hurt your feelings a little bit?
I always said, like, I'm so proud that these guys are outperforming me. But if I covered a class for a coach and they were like, oh, is Madelon sick? With some disappointment in the voice. I went away from that, delegating, more of the end delivery of the service tasks. So retention, email work, or coaching classes, really the front end, and moved slightly more to the back. But as the business grew and I started doing things on the side as well, it even became less sustainable to do some, back office day-to-day tasks. So about a year ago, when we were just over 5 years in, I hired one of our full-time coaches as a general manager. And she actually made that same transition from coaching about 4 or 5 days a week to not coaching at all. Hired a new head coach as well a few years ago to make sure that I didn't have to, assess the coaches, have the tough talks. Now 7 years on, I just had a talk the day before yesterday with my business partner. Like, what are the two of us actually going to do next year? Because right now we're just, we're leeching a bit. Like, we're taking away, most of the profit of the gym, which isn't huge. We're not super profit focused, but enough, for both of us to live off easily. We kind of sat down and we're like, we made ourselves obsolete. And I know that's the goal of like being an entrepreneur. But yeah, it feels weird. It feels good, to say, hey, I'm going to take a week off and not be missed. But it's a weird evolution to go through. And I feel like it's almost come full circle, because now, when all the coaches are on holidays and I have to cover a class, I have that same energy again, from that first year of coaching, like, oh, this is so cool. Yeah. It went from delegating the front end stuff, the coaching, admin, or retention work, and then finally to delegating the bigger tasks as well.
Yeah, and I think it's important too that like every step of the way wasn't you just walking away from something. You know what I mean? Each one was you had to what's the word? You had to turn up your what you did into a process
Yeah,
and find a
exactly.
person and give someone that responsibility. And I think it's not as simple as like I don't coach anymore. It's like, well, what is the philosophy? Is that written down? How do I
Yeah.
acquire talent? Like all these things aren't just things that we throw up all willy-nilly. You really have to,
Mhm.
and I know you have a mindset for that very much. You do the thing and
Yeah.
then you replicate it and you
Yeah.
systemize it and you hand it off. And that has been, I from watching from the outside, the recipe for the growth of your business has been that you cannot continue to be the bottleneck because there's only one of you, and you always have to empower people and grow the system.
Yeah, and you want the coach, you want members to show up for the entire coaching staff and not make it the Willem show, or the Tyler show. And even though
Yes.
that's very attractive and you form the gym, it's your baby. So a lot of your personal principles and convictions, they are kind of pushed out, whether it's through social media or how, are you the kind of gym where you're putting on the silver gloves and being really sweet to everyone, or are you like a hardcore raw gym? That kind of stuff gets formed through the first coaches and usually the owners.
Yeah.
But I think two big things in this, definitely delegating coaching specifically and moving to the back. On the one end, you can't teach every single coach, you can't take everyone by the hand, because then you're just doing double the work.
Hmm.
You're hiring a new coach and you're with them for 20 hours or every other day to help them out. So one thing that was really big for us was, you kind of said that already, operating from principles and from a philosophy.
Yeah.
So, instead of explaining every single step and every single rule, we have a few set in stone principles. And if coaches can fall back on those, like, hey, that's something we never do in Unscared, or that's something we always do, that makes it a lot easier. And I'm also inherently pretty lazy. So that did push me to make sure that I wasn't doing double the work. So
Yeah.
systemizing, and that's a very popular buzzword, like build your systems.
Yeah.
Having some systems in place that you can replicate and scale up with every single new coach you hire without going through that same process again. I think those two things, operating from principles and having some things that you do more and more times systematized, those are two things you need to have in place before starting to delegate an important task, maybe the important task of coaching and actually delivering the service to your members and customers. Yeah.
You took us on a journey of 7 years,
Yeah.
and you're dropping just bombs right now that took you 7 years to learn, right? And it's like, it's, oh
Oh
man,
yeah,
like the systems
definitely.
and processes. But what do you think over those 7 years to get where you are now and thinking the way you do now? What was the hardest part? What was one of those things that really got you hung up or took you a while to finally be like, okay, like I got to do this? Like, what was kind of the hardest thing you dealt with?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I like get a social media reminder of, hey, you posted this 4 or 5 years ago, and I used to be a big mouth, so I posted a lot of very opinionated stuff. And now if I get a memory from one of those, I'm like, oh, dude, it's like
You're like, I had a business. What am I
five
doing?
years ago, and we had tough arguments. Um, and I think being able to change your mind on things, even something as deeply rooted as principles, is a good thing. But it's also a really tough thing. It's not fun to admit that you were wrong about something. And definitely if you're a typical gym bro tough guy, it's really hard to say like I was a fucking idiot back then. So that I think that was tough. And also, if you are invested, which most people who choose to be a coach or a trainer, they're pretty invested in the relationships they build with, I always feel weird saying customers. So um, you build a very intimate relationship, and moving to the back and basically telling your members that you build a relationship with, like, I'm done with you guys. That was tough. And then we do a lot of surveys every 6 months, and then just it was nice to see the compliments from members, like bring Willem back or bring this coach back. But it also feels it can also feel a bit shitty, like, hey,
Yeah.
I took this call. I want my new coaches to be appreciated as well. So
Yeah.
moving away from the relationships you build with longtime members, yeah, that's a tough thing. Definitely when you focus more on building long-term members instead of like high volume, high churn shit.
Yeah. I have another question. How do you determine? This is the thing John and I always struggle with to calibrate when we're moving businesses forward in the way that you have. Like, all right, we replicate. When do we hire new coaches? When do we do this? How do you determine, or what did you do to determine the pace with which you need to implement some of this stuff? Because sometimes it's tempting to do everything all at once
Yeah.
But then there's also that inherent pull to be like, man, can it just stay the way it is for a while?
Yeah,
How
yeah.
do you know when to put your foot on the gas and how hard to drive?
That's super twofold, because the way I did that years ago and the way I do it now are super different. Like every time I delegated or we hired someone else or I took on a new task while removing a few, the first few years, it was always by necessity. It was just too much, or we completely fucked something up and we just had no choice. And then after falling on my face with that quite a few times and always being relatively good at hiding it, me and my business partner definitely, we just said, hey, if we make a new change, we got to have everything set in place so we can make that change again without all this hassle or without going through this stressful stuff and being on a super strict time limit because one of our coaches is leaving next week. And now we got to get someone new on if we don't want to stand in. So the first few years, like all those good steps we took, most of them were just because we messed up and by necessity. But we definitely learned from that. And now it's when we change something, we really sit down. It's like, hey, who is responsible? Who do we need to inform about this? And how can we make sure that if we have to do this again, it's not going to be the hassle it is now.
That's the piece that I think so many people struggle with too, is like you said, you waited till it was necessary a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing, like oftentimes we just sit back and you're like, okay, well now you just wait for like the universe to push you in a direction and like break some of your shit in order for you to go. And like if a coach leaves, like you said, a coach leaves, like, oh, I got to scramble. Now I'm back on the floor and I have no systems to cover this. Maybe you don't have enough staff. If each of your coach takes 2 weeks off and you're like, well, at some point in the year, like, well, now I'm still coaching 10 weeks a year. What is happening now?
Yeah.
It can't, even the backup tasks shouldn't be falling to you. I think once people realize that, you're like, oh, okay, well, I got to start building things now.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you're gonna have to do it by necessity, and it still sometimes happens. Obviously, we had a COVID outbreak among our coaching staff. You can have all the systems and shit in the world. You're gonna have to step in, and it's gonna be a bit. But no, I think it's tough for people to give away the tasks they really like. On the one hand, and coaching for most people who own a gym and most people start a gym, especially a boutique fitness studio, a personal training center, weightlifting or CrossFit gym. Almost all guys or girls who start that, they start from passion of coaching usually. So giving away that fun part of connecting with your members, transferring, the principles and training stuff that you really like and want other people to adopt, giving that part away is pretty tough. And you're going to have new coaches that are going to not perform at your level first, or if you get really lucky, they do, but usually, and that's something you just have to get through, because it will be, profitable in the end. The other thing is once you start delegating tasks, and I think that's even trickier than giving something away that you like, because if you give something away that you like, whether that's social media stuff or coaching, you're going to be automatically involved. So when I hired my first new coaches, I was still very excited to assess them and, have performance talks with them and say, hey, that class was really good, but maybe, but once I started delegating things that I wanted to do my way, and finance was a big thing for me, I needed to pay all the bills and I wanted to do all the bookkeeping myself. And I wanted to make sure that I was involved in monthly reporting. And it's actually funny because today, because it's almost Christmas break here, the lady who now does most of our bookkeeping, who's the mom of one of our coaches, actually, she came by to deliver a Christmas gift for me, which was really sweet. And I said, hey, I'm going to have a podcast recording later today again. And I'm going to be talking about delegation. Can I use you as an example? And then she laughed because the first, like giving away that finance part, which was my control stuff, and I did it my way, and no one else could ever understand how exactly I did it.
As though you were a finance expert too at that point. You're like, no, I just survived this, and I'm hanging on to
this. We have one big accountant, and he just does like the yearly report and checks her taxes and stuff. And he does that quarterly usually. And the first time she took over, and I was like, oh, this is going to be a fucking mess. I'm going to have to control that. I got a call from my accountant after that quarter, and he was like, hey, man, you really stepped up your game in that. It was always really messy. It's good that you invested some time. And I was like, hey, yeah, thanks, bro. Yeah, it was a conversation I had today, and I think that's very typical. So, I think it's really good, and we do that now a lot. We started rotating tasks now that we have a slightly bigger staff. So everyone, the girl who does retention suddenly does the programming. The guy who does facilities suddenly does retention, and the head coach does some facility work. And it's,
so you've got like everybody learning a little bit more about the business. So if they want to move a direction or they can cover, it makes your business really flexible.
Yeah. So like worst case scenario, what we have had so far is that someone would say like, wait, how are you doing this for 30 hours a week? I was done really fast, which is a bit computational, but it does teach you something about the business and your employees. And best case scenario, it's usually someone that says like, whoa, that's a lot of work, but why don't you do this like that? And someone's like, oh yeah, shit, I never thought about it that way. So
one of the things that we find a lot too is, you've kind of touched on this as you go, is that as people begin to delegate, you do have to take a step down in quality, most likely, unless you just find an ace. But even an ace is not attuned to your system. So of course, it's a step back in effectiveness or efficiency a little bit in the beginning, from coaching to finance to maybe social media to marketing to programming to sales. You know what I mean? To all those stuff. And it does get to the point where you just have to go, all right, I got to maybe take like a 20% hit in productivity or 30, but I get to lose 100% of my effort in this project. And whoever I plug in will improve. And that's the mindset that I think a lot of gym owners need to hear. And that's why we wanted to really have you on, because you've done that so well, and your numbers show it. I mean, you don't get to over 500 members by not having a system that's durable and tested and thorough, and that is systems, not all people. It is people, but it always requires
boring,
people.
To write a system for how someone should hand in their invoice if they're a freelancer, and what tax percentage should be on it. But once you've explained that to a coach again and again, and a new coach again, then you're going to be like, hey, you know what? Maybe if I take half an hour, I zone in and I write the process down. And it's not sexy. You didn't start a gym to write a system about how someone should deliver a fucking invoice. You just want to teach them on a snatch, But it's like what you said. You have to accept that if you delegate something, especially coaching, there's usually going to be a drop in quality or effectiveness or productiveness. It's either that, or it's going to cost you money, because, delegating your social media, if you do that for a few hours a week to a professional media management freelancer or company, it's going to be better, but it's going to cost you some money. So you kind of, you got to wonder yourself, like, is it okay in this task if I take a small hit in quality, or, am I going to free myself up, and do I have the funds to delegate it to someone who's way better at it? Because I think, and I've had this pitfall a million times, the arrogant thought to think that you can do all the tasks you have in the first few years as a gym owner, the arrogant idea that you're going to be the best or the most efficient, it's confrontational to hear, but everything you do in your gym, there's someone who can either do it better, faster, cheaper, or more effective, and sometimes.
And they all have that one thing in a common too, though, is they're not you, which makes them the most valuable thing, is that somebody who's not you has to do this shit, because there's only so many hours in the day. That's an important thing you touched on, because if you're still doing your gym social media, man, there's a whole wealth of information and data and skilled people with lots of experience doing social media. I really still prefer something organic that's plugged into your community, but you can do that via your own photographers, your own style, your own messaging, or you communicate better to your social media people what your stuff really is, what your business is, what your mindset, your philosophy, what you want your messaging to be, which requires you to know that, which sometimes means you have to spend time sitting down and working on your business and understanding these unsexy things, which is like, okay, well, who is my ideal client? What are their backgrounds? What do they want to hear? What is keeping them from joining a gym? A lot of that stuff, you got to do that boring work, but then now handing this off, eventually you'll take the hit in the beginning, either money or time or efficacy. But in anything that you delegate, as time goes on, now you have a coach who universally is more liked in your gym, who is your head coach than you, and now has taken on the role of general manager, which every time you drop one of these systems and delegate something down, you can step forward and work on something more important for the business, which makes a huge impact. We talked in the beginning, Willem, you've said that your goal still is general health. The impact you want Unscared to have is to get people off their ass and make health and fitness a priority. And yes, you could do a lot if you had an 80-member gym and were struggling. But because you got good at business, your true goal, you were able to do better for 500 some fucking people right now instead of 80 people while you're not making a living. And you're creating people making a living and making careers in fitness and health that feeds their families and stuff. If the gym owners wanting to be a martyr thing makes them ineffective at their actual goal, which is having an impact on health. If you suck at business, your business can't help as many people. So what are you trying to do here?
Yeah, and exactly. I think every starting gym owner that listens to your podcast will recognize the thing I've had a few times before I started, giving away my classes to new coaches, that you're teaching your 5th block of classes in the week and you're tired, and a member who pays you to make them fitter is like, hey, are you okay? Like, oh, it's been a rough week and I still got to do this and that, and that's a horrible thing. I've done that a lot of times, and I've seen that with other gym owners as well, and it's a sweet thing that members are so connected or involved or empathic with your gym that they actually ask, the main coach, like, are you okay? But that's not where you want to be. And I think social media is a good example with delegating, because a lot of gym owners do that at the start themselves, which I don't think is a bad thing. You want to convey your message and your gym and your promise to prospective clients and manage the expectations. But we took a few years to actually delegate that to one of our younger coaches who had personally like 10 times the followers we had with our social media accounts. And then you come back to actually what we talked about right at the beginning. So having principles set in place and having systems set in place. So social media is a nice, easy example. Our principles were, hey, if you post something for Unscared, it needs to either inspire people to come train with us, needs to inform people about what we do, or it needs to just make people laugh. And that's the principle part. So don't do filler posts with like, hey, today's workout, here's a picture of the whiteboard. Like, yeah, no one gives a shit.
Yeah.
And then the systematized part was, hey, we want 3 or 4 posts a week. And every Monday, I want you to present me, hey, I'm going to post this. I'll spell check it maybe, or a copy editor will do that. Are you okay with the pictures we're using? And now, something that used to cost you a few hours a week and constantly checking your messages, you kind of just said, hey, I want this many posts, this needs to be the principles, we'll have 1 moment a week, which will cost me like 10 minutes to see how it goes. And yeah, it cost me a bit more money, but you can just say, hey, I want you to work on this for 2 hours a week, let me know if that's too much or too little. And then if you look at, I think a lot of business coaching in the gym scene call it effectively hourly rate, or effective hourly rate. And it's basically, hey, how much money are you getting out of the gym? How many hours are you working? Divide that by each other. Okay, this is what you basically make in an hour from all these tasks you're doing. How many of those can be done by someone way cheaper, or can you do for the same amount of money, but it means that you will free up so much more time? And that's a very confrontational.
There's a way to game that number, Willem. It's just pay yourself less money. Just live off of less money. And now, and by the way, that's the system a lot of people do, right? So, okay, well, I can't take any money. That's where a lot of people are at.
Yeah. I'm like, I need to hire better coaches, but I don't know where to cut funds. But if I coach a day less, I'll just pay myself less. And I know very few gym owners that, made a livable wage in their first year. I mean, I know your story from the early Massonomics days, and it's that's a very recognizable story. We barely paid ourselves in the first year, and then you have that pitfall where once you start hiring coaches, you tell them, "Well, I actually made way less than you," and that's the same as telling a member, like, "I'm not doing too good today." Like, no one cares, man. Put on your big boy pants. You started a business.
What did you have to get in place? So we talked a lot about delegation, which is awesome, and that's the direction that we want everybody to eventually be able to get to. But there were some fundamental things that you had to get in place first. Before you could just start delegating things away. And I think that's where I think a lot of gym owners early on, especially where they are in like their journey, they will see shiny things that they think that matters. Like, oh, well, they're doing this. The example we've always given is like somebody sees somebody with like a really sweet website, and because their website is sweet, that's why they're so successful.
Yeah.
And that's where it's, no, like there's some fundamental foundational things that you were able to get in place that then allowed you to be like, all right, now we need to delegate this thing because you had certain skills that only you could do. You couldn't outsource some of the pieces. And I think that's interesting too, where you are now 7 years later, you guys are sitting back and saying, what is our superpower? Like, what are we supposed to be doing now?
Why am I here?
what were some of those foundational things you talked about getting, like the systems that were in place, right? And you knew what your gym's ethos were, you knew who you were, so that was able to delegate. What were some of those other things that you were able to really get foundationally in place to where you could say, I'm ready to
Yeah.
now delegate this out and hand this off and start
Yeah,
this process?
I mean, I think a really important thing, and this is, you don't have to sit down with like a branding or marketing guy to do this. I think you can just, because I believe in kind of induction. So starting from a few principles and what can you do, what can you delegate, which decisions can you make while hanging on to those principles. And I think you need to ask yourself, okay, what do we want to promise prospect members? What do we want to keep offering to existing members? And how do we want our staff to feel in the gym or talk about the gym or whatever? And for us, our end goal, our main goal with the gym is to convince as many people as possible that working out, training, doing physical strength training is something that should be an enjoyable part of your day or your week. It shouldn't be something that you have to do or else. And that has been the marketing ploy for the entire global gym industry forever. You don't want to get fat? Come train. You don't want to look like shit anymore? Come train or else,
You don't want cancer? Come train. You don't want diabetes? Come train. You don't want pain? Come train.
Training should be so much fun that we shouldn't even have to convince you. You have to be knocking on the doors. For our staff, we've always said, like, in most European countries, a lot of CrossFit coaches, and that's definitely changed, but our weightlifting coaches, they did it freelance on the side for a free membership or next to their full-time job. We wanted to say, hey, we're in a place in history from in the history of civilization and mankind. We've never been more overweight, more chronically ill. We've been, we sit at work, we sit on the way to work, and then we get home and we sit again. So to me, it's an extremely weird thing that, it's not one of the most appreciated and well-paid jobs. And we were like, hey, instead of looking at what the average pay is for a coach and just like getting at the bare minimum, no, we want people to quit their day office job to become a full-time coach for us, or that kind of stuff. And then once you have those like end goals, those principles in place, then you can answer that question and be like, okay, once I hire someone to do a new task, once I start to systematize something, how can I do all that without losing those principles? And sometimes something can look really cheap, effective, and easy, but if it breaks those principles, you're like, I can't do that. And for us, a quick example is retention emails. And retention is an overused word, but basically non-face-to-face contact with members. It's really easy to automate that. It saves you a bunch of time. But if you have a gym, especially with just 100 or 200 members, you can automate stuff, but you should never fully automate communication. You still want to, we automate a part of it. So all members that haven't showed up for the last 10 days, we get an automatic list. We get an automatic reminder to email them. But still in that email, we will say, hey, how's the leg doing? Because we know this person has a knee issue. Yeah. Or, hey, I know you were on vacation, but I think that's been a while. You got to come back. And if you're going to be running a low volume, definitely compared to a global gym, a low volume gym with a high level of service, I think keeping those things intact and being able to, profit from having a low volume of members, you need to be able to still have a few things that you can't fully automate. And again, that question can only be answered. What are your main goals and principles with the gym for your staff, for prospective members and current members? How much can I systematize, delegate, or automate without losing those principles?
Yeah. How much can I get away with without losing my soul?
Yeah.
It's usually how it goes. That's the way, but that's the way a lot of it works.
Yeah. And losing your soul is a good one because, once I started making enough money to actually, not have to dig into my savings to run the gym, and it took me more than a year. Once I started making more and more serious money with it, I started thinking, am I doing enough now? Am I starting to lose my soul in the gym? And sometimes, like I said, sometimes it can look super easy, cheap, and profitable, but members will notice, especially longtime members. If you're doing something that will lose the soul of the gym without, sounding too new agey, but I think you know what I mean. So I like, sticking to your principles and not losing your soul while still making business-wise profitable decision.
Yeah.
And that's easier said than done. That's easy to say when you have a big profit margin.
When money comes knocking, You know what I mean? That is the very different thing. You're like, well, wait a minute. Once you, especially when you understand a lot of the sales and retention and resale systems and things like that are out there that you can use, you can just turn the volume up sometimes. And you know you didn't get to 500, over 500 members by going from 100 to 500 with the snap of your fingers. Your
No,
systems had to grow to accommodate it. You still had to constantly be doing quality control of what's going on the floor. This is why we always tell people, this is why I wanted to take you through this, or have you take us through this journey you've been on, because so many people just want to turn on the leads faucet.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? All right, just get leads. And it's like, well, some of you can't fucking sell anyways.
Yeah,
you couldn't sell if you had a conversation.
Facebook pixel marketing company and build a leads funnel and do some, high ticket bait and switch stuff. It's tempting to do that, but it's it doesn't work in the end. And I know some of my friends run businesses like this, so I really hope they're not listening to this podcast. No, it's a tricky thing, and we had 3 member stops of over 2 months or more in the first few years because we were growing fast, but we were like, okay, we got to stop for a while, and it worked out well because it also created this feeling of exclusivity.
Yeah.
But just stopping for a few months if you're growing really well and be like, okay, how can we get the gym ready to have 100 more members instead of constantly be like, oh shit, we got to add an extra class. Oh shit, we got to hire a new coach because people keep flowing in.
That is a really cool concept, Willem, too, like you said, because you had got to a certain point and now it's like, okay, I need to fulfill on all these clients and I need to do a good job. And you know that if you just kept letting the leads faucet start pouring in and letting new clients start rolling in, that it's going to cause more problems. They're going to damage your reputation, ruin your quality delivery. And that moment where you were at right now, or at then, when you said, all right, hold on, no more people, we're going to lead free, we're going to do a new client freeze, and we're just going to then build our processes and start game planning how we're going to do this. Okay, so when we open things up for 20 more, how are we going to do this? What's it going to look like? And you spent that time working on your business and preparing your business instead of just doing the thing that all of us normally do, is just whore ourselves out for more customers, which is essentially the game we play. Truthfully, you know how it goes in the beginning. That is the game you play for a while. You're like, I just need new people. I need new people. And there is a point where you got to go, stop. This is not the game. Quit chasing this. You're not prepared for new people. You need to get ready for new people. And until you are, you'll never get them because you'll break.
Yeah, or you're going to alienate your current member base. And at the first year, we started with 0 members. We wanted to have everyone in, and even guys or girls who had a training goal or a fitness goal that was in no way, shape, or form compatible with what we offered. There were people like, oh, you're just doing this programming today. I want to get fucked up for an hour. And we were like, oh, we do that sometimes as well. You're going to lose those numbers anyway. Stopping sometimes. And I think, if you get to the point where you can actually afford a member stop, that's a great moment to say, okay, what does our pricing look like? What does our service offering look like? And before we open up again, we're going to change that. And that only the few handfuls of gym owners I've coached over the last 2 years, which was a weird time to coach gym owners with the lockdown. Only, in those, with most of those, if they got to a point where their gyms were filling up to the point where they had to hire new people, we said, hey, pause, check with your current members what they're missing, how happy they are, see if you have the systems and the staff and the class schedule in place to host all those new members. And that's usually also a good moment to think about your pricing strategy as well. While not, while still maybe grandfathering your current member base. But the fact that you can, afford a member stop is usually also a sign that you can. Too cheap. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And that's a fundamental principle a lot of people get to, is they're afraid to ask for more money. But it's like, well, it's just an indicator. It also gives you a better opportunity to deliver higher value to the people you are getting in. And I think, like you said, when you're in that moment where you have a client who's like, man, Willem, what's going on today? And you're stressed and you're doing all the coaching, that guy is going to be pissed if you pack another 20 people in the gym and he already sees his coach is less useful to him than you are, than he is to you. And that you're about to burn out. And he's like, well, why is all these fucking new people in here? He can't handle this. What are we doing? And it costs you, I think it can cost you a lot of trust within and goodwill within your existing business by chasing too many new people.
Yeah. What I like about, the the stuff you put out from podcast to education and all that stuff is that you guys, definitely also push the idea of not just opening that leads faucet and getting more and more volume and quantity of people in, but focusing on, higher quality members and offering them a higher quality service. I think the next pitfall, usually if you get to that mindset, we're like, hey, I don't need more members. I need members that show up, that stay, that become ambassadors and, get other people in that they've already prepared for what the promise of your gym is. But I think a big risk once you get past that point is people like, well, I just got to raise my prices. I've moved on from that old school Globo gym mindset of volume. I'm a new school gym owner. I'm just going to cap it. Just going to up the price. And I think that's a really dangerous thing to do. You got to sit down first and be like, hey, just the fact that we want more people to come in, that we can host, so we'll just up the price. This isn't Keynesian, what do you call it? Keynesian economics.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it doesn't, of course, it does work a bit like that, but you got to really look, okay, why are people staying here? What is the service that people are requesting from us? What would be a fair price for that? And for that price, can I actually hire the people to do that for me, or get the extra equipment, or, whatever it is that you need for what your customers are demanding of you. And sometimes when you have those principles in place and you feel like you have everything set, you've stopped just getting new and new members in, your demographics are, you have educated coaches that can convey your message, even when everything seems perfect, you can still get thrown a really shitty curveball. And we've had 2 6-month lockdowns here. So going back to those principles, one of those for our staff was, we want all coaches, freelancers or full-time coaches, to have a serious career here. And what you saw, whether it was in restaurants and bars in lockdown, or with most gyms that mainly run on freelancers, they're like, well, we're locked down. You guys are freelancers.
Tough shit.
Yeah. And we were like, hey, this is an easy call for us. We've always said coaches first, happy coaches means happy members. We want people to build a career. Even the freelancers, as long as this lockdown takes, the first one I was like 15 days to slow the curve. I can pay my people for 15 days.
You're like, shit, maybe I should have rethought this policy.
Yeah,
This is going to drag on.
And definitely, I've had two, there were 2 moments in both lockdowns where me and the other owner made significantly less than our full-time coaches. And that felt pretty bad. And I've reconsidered my principles sometimes, like, oh shit, but now that we're, opening up again the last few months, everyone is looking for coaches, and we have happy coaches, people that are still in place. So I think the message I'm trying to convey in this brand is not getting pity for making less than my coaches, but saying, if you get thrown a shitty curveball and you start doubting your principles, if you've been around on those principles for a few years, it's going to repay itself in the end. Selling your soul on that in a moment it's always going to come and bite you back in the ass.
Yeah.
So,
well, in stress testing, right?
Yeah.
A lot of us are like, oh, well, they're not willing to gamble. They don't have the balls, right, to be able to actually stress test their systems. It's like, oh, no, like I can handle this, or I can handle that. And it's like, how often are you testing it? Because at the end of the day, you may just be hiding whatever you think you have in place, where, talk about, when we say principles and frameworks, and the word principles probably gets thrown around a lot. And I think it's a little bit too liberally. When you say you all have principles that have been stress tested, like, you're not fucking around, because it's like, oh, no. Like, we've actually proven that what makes us who we are, that can handle some of the shit that has closed. I don't even know what the percentages are of the amount of gyms around the world. It's like, oh no, not only did we not close, but we didn't fire any of our people, and we didn't lose, right? We still have, 600 members, right? It's a testament to when you say the word principle.
I use the analogy of training, which always hits home with other gym owners. Currently, all of us living in the first world, we have pretty comfortable lives, and a lot of us train to create some sort of artificial adversity. So when real adversity hits, we're ready. And whether that's old age or war or whatever, we're going to be resilient. And I think running your business in the same way that you run your training, you test stuff, you build up, and then every now and then, in training, you usually get your you plan your 1 rep max if you're a weightlifter or a powerlifter. With CrossFit, every time you do a CrossFit competition, and I want to say I've never been a CrossFit competitor, but I've coached a lot of CrossFit competitors, and you get shit thrown your way every competition. You have no idea what's fucking coming, but you're going to be ready if you've stress tested it a few times, if you know where your weaknesses are. And especially gym owners who've been athletes themselves, I think they need to adopt some of their athlete mindset to their business as well. And it helps for a lot of them. It's just sometimes, and I'm always careful with this advice, if you're the kind of athlete that always runs himself to the fucking brink and breaks all the time, maybe be careful which of your training restrictions you adopt to your business. But in general, creating artificial adversity, stress testing, if the first time you hit trouble, and for us, honestly, I had my business partner leave to work for Elico for a few years, which was a really big stress test for me because he was always the visionary guy and I was the workhorse, and suddenly I was the main guy. That was my big stress test, and it worked out really good, luckily. But the first real stress test for the gym was the long lockdown, and we had a few moments where we were like, fuck all this shit. I'm done with it. And then we had to kind of smack each other in the face. Like, this is the first time we've had real adversity and we're ready to throw in the towel. Like, if we're going to do that now, we didn't deserve any of this. And I think that hits home with a lot of gym owners.
And I remember some of those talks we had at your place in Utrecht during the lockdown. I remember midway through, because we were doing the same thing. We were trying to, all right, how do we adapt to online only? What do we do? What can we at least keep? How do we do this? And I remember you saying like, all right, well, I got to keep the coaches around. So the coaches are doing video stuff, just whatever we can do, trying to add value, giving them work, what they could do in the building. But it was this like, we don't know how long it's going to go. I don't know how long this can be. I know people aren't canceling. We're doing everything we can. And it was, a lot of people don't even understand that uncertainty. I think more do now, though, that we're subjected to the COVID lockdowns, but there's still a lot that weren't, that were able to still kind of operate and don't quite get what it really is to have to like dig in and say, all right, I want to keep these. It's one thing to say, I'm willing to take the leap and hire a person and spend money. And I'm willing to do that because that's for the growth of the business. But your business isn't very resilient if that's all you've done.
Yeah. And again,
because you got to build it so then you can keep that person when the bottom falls out, because you do need that person. You cannot just get to that point and stop. You have to cement everything in and make it durable and resilient and redundant. And I think that's the reason you were able to, I think, survive all of it, because you had so many things in place, so much trust. You had the right staff. Everybody had a process mindset. And I think that is the reason that the gym is still thriving today.
Yeah, and I think we come back to like those starting principles again, to really super overuse this word once more. But with as soon as the first lockdown happened, every single gym I knew was like, we're gonna do online live workouts or brief video workouts. I was like, no, you got to take a step back. What are you promising current or prospective members? What do you want from your staff, or what do you promise your staff? Okay, how can we do that now that the physical space of the gym is closed? Just going online, if that's doesn't fit at all to what you try to convey with the gym. Like, imagine if you're like a raw ass badass powerlifting gym, we're like, we're gonna do Zoom classes now.
Get some right? Get some bands and a yoga mat, and we're gonna get thick today, guys. Yeah.
And I mean, we had that was a funny thing. So we did switch to we had pre-recorded classes with a videographer, and then we did some live classes as well. And the cool thing was that we suddenly had, because we do everything in English, because I'm a pseudo-American, which my British friends tell me all the time because of this accent, which thanks to you guys is going to be horrible again for a week.
You sound great.
Thanks, brother.
There you go. Exactly.
And Willem gets on here, is like, all right, y'all.
Yeah. We actually have foreign members like suddenly like, oh, you guys are doing live classes? Like, I'll take a membership again. I've been missing you guys since I moved back to wherever, which was really cool. But then as soon as, we started back up indoors, and we had some older or immunocompromised people that were still pretty scared early in the pandemic, we're like, hey, can we keep doing video classes as well? And we're like, yeah, sure. And then we had 2 or 3 people there a day, maybe, so sometimes you got to let stuff go again. And what I really liked about the pandemic, and there's very few things I like about it, obviously, but is the fact that everyone was always talking about the next step is going to be super scalability of gyms. So even boutique fitness studios or CrossFit or weightlifting or strongman gyms, we're going to go online and sell online programs. And everyone was like, that's going to be the next infinitely scalable step for our gym. And we kind of learned, like, as soon as people could get back indoors, like, nope, online training is not in-person training. You know, we want some connection. We want to have that third place, so to say.
Plus that there was blood in the water. We had the conversation early on. I was like, well, you know, maybe you can just sell them. You got the video. I was like, fuck it. You know what I mean? It is a good whatever. And that thing is, and as soon as the smoke cleared on the first like lockdown, everybody was so sick of Zoom calls. Even doing, you know, with us doing education stuff, we find very much like the value of coaching calls and shit. Nobody cares. Nobody wants to get on a Zoom call anymore. I don't want to get on a Zoom call. If I'm paying you or if you're paying me, nobody wants to really have to do this about a work thing. It was just nobody cares. And so many businesses were prepared to pivot to that. It was so oversaturated and got really uninteresting really quick to everybody who was looking. You know,
imagine if you're like an IT desk jockey and you spend, 10 hours a day in front of a screen and doing Zoom calls. And the only thing we want to kind of teach with the gym is, hey, at least for an hour a day, get off your ass away from a screen. And we're like, hey, we have this cool service.
It's the only thing we can do.
It's a horrible thing. So I like the fact that people were like, okay, we've tried online training and shit. We just want to see people again, touch actual gear. And I mean, training equipment in this case.
Of course.
Steroids not until the next pandemic, guys. The interesting thing, Willem, so maybe we probably got to get close, John.
Well, I did want to come back because you dropped something that, Tyler, we have to speak to because of the amount of interactions we have had recently. Willem, you touched on the point of you need to start kind of treating your business your gym as a business and do it a little bit the way you train.
Yeah.
This means you have to fucking train.
Yeah.
So this means as a gym owner, like it's there are certain pillars that it's as we get busy, because I guarantee you, Tyler, you've been in this boat. I guarantee you all three of us and everybody that's listening has been stuck here once before. We start getting busy doing fucking all the things. And then we get busy doing maybe at one thing. Like I get really heavy into business and that's where I'm at. And my relationship with like my family goes to shit. I stop training. I stop eating well. Like it's all of a sudden become one track minded and it's fucking like the wheels are going to come off.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot of gym owners that are like, oh man, I'm too busy. I don't have time to, and then like fill in the blank. I don't have time to eat well. I don't have time to train. I don't have time to this. And guess what? It's fucking obvious. If anyone that's a third party that kind of has their shit relatively together can look and be like, oh, you're running your business the same way it's obvious how you run your life. And so and I think and that might be a good thing to kind of round it off as well, to keep with that analogy of training and how you train and how you run your business. I mean, you guys know this as well. There's one proven effective way to get strong naturally, which is train consistently over a long time. Yeah. So just like you need consistency in training, whether that's, good periodization of your volume and actualization blocks, or whether that's just showing up to a class a few times a week, you got to have the same thing with your business as well. And that becomes so much more important once you start hiring people and delegating tasks. Even when you delegate a task, you still need to be consistent. You can't sometimes take over that task and then be surprised when one of the people you hired to do it doesn't do it one day because sometimes you stepped in. You got to be consistent with checking in on someone. You can't just assess a coach 3 times in a week and then not for a few months. You got to, if you delegate, it's going to cost you way less time. It's going to cost you maybe more money, but you still have to be consistent on when you check in or how you delegate stuff to everyone else. And it's the same with training. You can't just go hard for a few weeks and then drop off again. Having a few set moments to just check in with who you delegated stuff with, it's very simple, but it's not easy. It's really easy to say, like, I've delegated that. I'll check in with her tomorrow or him tomorrow. So
there is another thing on the training thing that I always find interesting too, is that we talk about consistency that needs to happen, and on your business, to continue the training analogy, on your business, you need to be working on your business, not in it. Meaning if you're coaching classes, if you're just doing the doing and not growing or progressing, you're literally not getting those reps in. meaning your business stayed the same. It stayed untrained, unimproved this week. It survived this week, just like you did, on your ass with a cheeseburger in your hand watching TV or however that goes, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's what I see so many times is people spend time working on their business or working in their business and never get any reps working on their business. It's survival only. And it's like, well, and then you wonder 2, 3, 4 years later, like, why hasn't this gotten any better? It's like, well, your squat doesn't get any better if you don't fucking squat, and your business isn't going to get any better if you never address it. And if you just put blinders on and say, all right, open the doors, now we coach. And that's it's a surefire recipe to fail.
Yeah, exactly. Don't get used to putting out fires. If you had to put out a fire with something once or twice, you're like, okay, how the fuck can I make sure that this doesn't happen again? Because putting out fires is super fucking stressful. But I know a lot of people that run businesses, and that's how I've done it the first year or two as well. It's like, you know, everything is going well. If something fucks up, I'll fix it then. You know, you got to be prepared for that. And if you have to put out the same fire twice, that's really the point where you got to start, you know, having something in place, whether that's an extra employee or a proven system, anything like that. So, yeah. I think that I like the training analogy. Now that we're talking about
they work. It's the language we speak.
I'm more at the point where I start to approach my training like I run the business. It's a bit better. So.
Which is from home, 3 hours a day now. Well, we better let you get going. Well, I know we're running a little long.
Sure thing, man. It's Friday night here, so.
Yeah. We're keeping Willem out on a Friday night, home on a Friday night. This is not the thing that I was put on this earth. I'm here to take Willem out on Friday nights.
Yeah, there's a bit of mystery liquid in here. So. Just to circle back where Tyler started, that if we went out with the two of us in Utrecht, which was comically to see, because I'm 5'7", and Tyler is like 6'11". So whenever we would order a drink, like 2 beers, he would always order like the strongest double shot of whiskey next to it. So at least if we went out, we were at the same level by the end of the night.
Yeah, because if we just drank beer for beer, Willem would be in the hospital. So I go about 2.5 to his 1, which just means I got to pick up the pace. And he's usually pretty good at buying for a Dutch guy. So it really worked out for me in the long run.
You never went Dutch. No,
we never did.
I think next episode we should compare like you know, destructive drinking habits, how you run your business instead of training. I'm sure there's something there.
I agree. Willem, thanks a lot for joining us, man. I really do appreciate it. Well, I'm going to put your links and stuff in the bottom for Unscared, but Unscared in Utrecht in the Netherlands, tremendous, big, great gym, great place. We had the pleasure of training and seeing the facility and having seminars and stuff there. And they got a really great thing going if you're in the area. Beautiful town, beautiful people, beautiful gym. So thanks, Willem. I really appreciate your time. You can check us out on everything else on all the things. Hackyourgym.com. Follow me at Tyler F. and Stone. You can follow the podcast at Gym Owners Podcast. You go to community.hackyourgym.com, and that is the group where everybody can get in. And this is where people can go through some of these concepts and be talking and sharing their wins, successes, yada, 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 all the good stuff. John, how can they find you?
JBanksFL on Instagram.
And Willem, well, I'll just put your stuff below.
Yeah, I'm not going to spell that out for any minute.
Notice I only did first names on this episode.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like
there's too many in the Dutch language for me to figure out. All right, thanks everybody, and we'll see you soon.
It was a nice way to spend a Friday evening.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks.